r/entitled parents my ex demanded I fire my stepdaughter, big mistake. Hashtag chunk 1, the ultimatum. The email arrived on a Tuesday morning while I was reviewing quarterly reports at my desk. Subject, we need TO talk now. I almost deleted it without reading. I'd learned years ago that anything in all caps from Janet rarely warranted my time, but something made me click. Maybe it was the string of 3 follow-up emails sent within minutes, each marked urgent. Maybe it was the fact that my current wife, Sarah, had just walked past my office door with a kind of worried expression that suggested she'd already gotten the phone calls I was about to receive. I opened the email. Asterisk, you have exactly 48 hours to fire Emma from your company, or I will make sure you regret it for the rest of your life. This isn't a request. She has no business working there, and you know why. Don't test me on this. Janet asterisk. I read it 3 times, my jaw tightening with each pass. Emma. My stepdaughter. 19 years old, sweet as they come, and currently working 15 hours a week in our marketing department while she figured out her college plans. We hired her a month ago after Sarah mentioned she'd been struggling to find a job, typical new college student stuff, no experience, doors slamming in her face. I'd seen it as an opportunity. Not charity, Emma had earned every penny of her paycheck through legitimate work. But a chance to give her a real foot in the door, show her what professional environments look like, help her build some practical experience before she committed to a major. Apparently, that had been a mistake. I leaned back in my executive chair and stared at the ceiling of my corner office. 42 years old, self-made millionaire, built a successful digital marketing firm from scratch in less than a decade, and I was still dealing with fallout from a marriage that had ended 6 years ago. Janet and I had been a catastrophe wrapped in the illusion of romance. We married young, had a kid we both loved but couldn't manage to co-parent without bloodshed, and spent our years together engaged in a Cold War punctuated by occasional ceasefires that never lasted. When I finally filed for divorce, it was less about a specific infidelity or betrayal and more about the simple, exhausting realization that we brought out the absolute worst in each other. The settlement had been generous. I'd wanted clean breaks more than I'd wanted to punish her, and honestly, I could afford to be decent about it. The courts awarded her primary custody of our daughter, though Megan was 18 now and had moved in with me full-time anyway, a development that had sent Janet into a fury that still hadn't fully dissipated. Then I met Sarah. 3 years ago at a charity gala, of all places. Sarah was there with her sister, a successful architect in her own right, and I was there because my business manager had convinced me that visibility in the community was good for brand reputation. We talked for 40 minutes by the silent auction display, and I felt something I hadn't experienced in years, actual, effortless connection. The complications became apparent quickly. Sarah had been divorced for 5 years herself and had 2 children, Emma, then 17, and Marcus, then 15. When I met the kids, they were cautious but kind. Over the next year, as Sarah and I became serious, they thawed. By the time we married, they'd accepted me, not as a replacement for their father, who remained involved and actually decent, but as someone new in their lives who was trying to treat their mother well. I thought Janet would hate the marriage. I was right. I'd expected some jealousy, some reinvigorated custody battles, maybe some pointed comments to Megan about my midlife crisis wife. What I hadn't expected was the personal campaign against Sarah's kids. It started small. Pointed comments to Megan about how sad it was that I was now parenting other people's children instead of focusing on my own daughter. Suggestions that Sarah was a gold digger, that the marriage wouldn't last, that I was being manipulated. I shut it down when I found out, had several unpleasant conversations with Janet about boundaries. She'd backed off publicly but I knew, the resentment was metastasizing underneath. Emma getting hired at my firm had apparently been the final straw. I picked up my phone and called Sarah into my office. She appeared in the doorway within seconds, arms crossed, her expression a mixture of frustration and concern. She called you? I asked. 3 times. Left increasingly unhinged voicemails. Sarah moved into the office and closed the door behind her. What does she want? I turned my computer screen toward her so she could read the email. I watched her face as she processed it, first confusion, then anger, then something harder. Something protective. That's insane, Sarah said flatly. Emma works hard. She earned this job. I know. She's been nothing but kind to Janet's daughter. I know that too. Sarah sat down in the chair across from my desk, suddenly looking exhausted. She's really going to do this? She's really going to try to destroy our family over her own jealousy? I'd been asking myself the same question. Janet had always been vindictive, but she'd usually confined her vendettas to me, and even then, she'd eventually tired of them and moved on to whatever drama dominated her current social circle. Going after Emma felt different. It felt personal in a way that went beyond standard post-divorce bitterness. It felt like a threat. She says 48 hours, I said quietly. And if you don't? She says she'll make sure I regret it for the rest of my life. I quoted the email directly, watching Sarah's expression darken further. I'd built my career on being rational, strategic, careful. I made calculated moves and planned for contingencies. I didn't let emotions drive my decisions, which was partly why I'd been successful and partly why my first marriage had failed so spectacularly. But as I sat there in my office, looking at my wife, at this woman who transformed my life by simply existing in it, I made a decision that was anything but calculated. Janet had just declared war on the wrong family. And she had no idea what she'd just started. Hashtag chunk 2, the escalation. I didn't respond to Janet's email. That was intentional. My first instinct had been to fire back something cutting, something that would make clear exactly how inappropriate her demand was, how little power she actually held over my hiring decisions, how thoroughly I'd moved on from our toxic dynamic. But years of therapy, mandatory after the divorce, honestly the best thing to come out of that wreckage, had taught me that satisfying my impulse to lash out rarely solved anything. It usually just added fuel. So I waited. I let her stew in my silence. I documented the email and filed it away. What I didn't anticipate was how quickly she'd escalate. The first sign came on Wednesday afternoon when my office manager, Patricia, knocked on my door looking visibly stressed. We have a situation, she said without preamble. She'd worked for me for 5 years and had never used that specific phrase in my presence. The health department just called. Someone filed a complaint about our office. I felt my stomach drop. What kind of complaint? Unsanitary conditions. Pest infestation. They're sending an inspector tomorrow morning. Patricia's jaw was tight. I walked this office top to bottom this morning because I had a feeling something was off. Everything is immaculate. There's no way this is legitimate. Who filed it? They wouldn't tell me. Anonymous complaint, filed yesterday afternoon online. Patricia's eyes met mine, and I could see she'd already connected the dots. This is about the email your ex sent, isn't it? I nodded slowly. Probably. That's harassment. That's illegal. I know. But proving it's her will be difficult. What followed was a day of carefully controlled chaos. I called my lawyer, a sharp woman named Diana Chen who'd handled my divorce and had a healthy professional disdain for my ex-wife. She advised documentation of everything, which I was already doing. The health inspector showed up at 10 a.m. Thursday and spent 3 hours meticulously examining the office while my 13-person team worked around them, tension thick enough to cut with a knife. Unsurprisingly, the inspector found nothing. Not a single violation. He actually complimented our facility standards. But the damage had already been done in a way. My employees had been rattled. Emma, when she came in for her Friday shift, was visibly withdrawn. I caught her at her desk and asked her directly if she was okay. I heard what happened, she said quietly, not quite meeting my eyes. With the health inspection. Because of your ex-wife. Because you hired me. She finally looked up at me, and I could see the guilt written all over her face. I don't want to cause problems for you. For the company. If you think it would be better if I... No. I said it firmly enough that she startled slightly. Emma, listen to me. This is not your fault. Not even a little bit. What your mother's ex-wife is doing, that's on her. That's entirely her choice, and frankly, it's starting to look criminal. But maybe if I just quit. Absolutely not. That's exactly what she wants. And honestly, that would hurt your mother more than anything else could. Emma nodded, but I could see the doubt still lingering. I made a mental note to talk to Sarah about this later. Emma shouldn't have to carry guilt for an adult's vindictive behavior, and she shouldn't feel caught in the middle of a war that wasn't hers. The second escalation came that evening. Sarah called me as I was leaving the office, her voice tight with barely controlled anger. Janet showed up at my workplace, she said without preamble. I stopped walking. What? At my law firm. She came in asking for me specifically, and when I met her in the lobby, she basically accused me of alienating her from Megan and poisoning your mind against her. She was loud about it. Everyone heard. Sarah's voice shook slightly. She told me that if I didn't convince you to fire Emma, she'd make sure everyone in our professional circles knew what kind of people we really are. Jesus Christ. It gets worse. She mentioned the fact that I work in family law, specifically, and suggested that my clients might want to know I'm the kind of person who would deliberately turn a child against their other parent. She didn't say it directly, but the implication was clear. She was threatening to damage my professional reputation. I was already moving back toward my car, pulling up my lawyer's number on my phone. Diana answered on the second ring. It's escalating, I told her, and relayed what Sarah had just told me. She filed a false complaint with the health department yesterday. Today she showed up at Sarah's office making veiled threats about professional reputation. That's not veiled enough, Diana said. What she did at your office is filing a false report, that's illegal. What she's doing with your wife is closer to tortious interference and possibly defamation depending on what exactly she said. You need to document everything immediately. Get written statements from your office manager about the complaint. If possible, get a statement from witnesses at Sarah's firm. How far can this go legally? I asked, even though I wasn't sure I wanted to know the answer. If we can prove pattern and intent, pretty far. Harassment, tortious interference, potentially extortion given that she's making threats tied to specific demands. But right now you need to focus on documentation. Everything. Every email, every voicemail, every conversation reported back to you. After I hung up, I sat in my car for a moment in the parking garage, hands gripping the steering wheel. This had moved beyond a vindictive ex being difficult. This was coordinated, escalating, and increasingly unhinged. Janet had always been difficult, but she'd never been stupid. This level of over-the-top behavior, the anonymous complaint, the public confrontation at Sarah's office, the explicit threats, it suggested she wasn't thinking clearly anymore. She was running on pure emotion, pure spite. Which meant she was both more dangerous and more vulnerable. I started the engine and headed home, my mind already spinning through the next steps. By the time I pulled into my driveway, I'd made another decision. I was going to give Janet exactly what she thought she wanted. But first, I was going to build an airtight case against her, document every single move she made, and prepare to destroy her credibility so thoroughly that no one would believe a word out of her mouth. She wanted war. She was about to get one. And this time, I was going to win. Chunk 3, the pattern emerges. I spent the entire weekend in what Sarah called my strategist mode, the place I went when I needed to solve a complex problem with cold, methodical precision. Our kitchen table became my war room. I had my laptop open, 3 legal pads filled with notes, and a growing folder of screenshots, emails, and documented incidents. Sarah brought me coffee at regular intervals and didn't ask questions, which I appreciated. She understood that I needed to process this. The first thing I did was call Emma. Hey, I said when she picked up, her voice tentative like she was afraid I was calling to let her down gently. I need you to do something for me. I need you to write down everything you remember about your mother's behavior over the past few months. Specifically any time she said anything negative about Sarah, about me, about our marriage. Any threats, any complaints, anything that seemed off. Can you do that? There was a pause. Are you building a case against her? I'm documenting facts, I said carefully. That's all I'm doing right now. Okay, Emma said, and I could hear her take a breath. Yeah. I can do that. There's, actually quite a bit. That conversation became the first of many. I reached out to Patricia and got her formal statement about the health department complaint. I contacted the inspector's office and requested a copy of the official report clearing us. I had Sarah document everything she could remember about Janet's appearance at her office, the exact words, the witnesses present, the timeline. Then I did something I probably should have done months ago. I called Janet's ex-husband. Not for information directly, but because I needed context. I needed to understand if this behavior was new or if it was a pattern. Richard, I said when he picked up. I'd met him a handful of times at custody exchanges and mutual acquaintance events. We'd never been friendly, but we'd always been civil. It's Michael. I need to ask you something, and I need you to be honest with me. Okay. He sounded wary. Did Janet ever pull anything like this with you? False accusations, going after people in your life, escalating conflicts when she didn't get her way. There was a long silence on the other end. Then, Jesus. What did she do? I gave him the abbreviated version, the ultimatum, the health department complaint, the confrontation at Sarah's office. Richard let out a low whistle. Yeah. Yeah, that tracks. Look, I don't like to air this stuff, but if you're asking, you probably need to know. When we were married, every time I didn't do exactly what she wanted, she'd find some way to escalate. She filed a false CPS report on my second wife. Said she was abusing Megan. Nothing came of it because it was obviously bullshit, but it was ugly. And there was this incident with her boss. I never got the full story, but she accused him of harassment, and the way she told it to people made it sound like he was a predator. He ended up leaving the company just to get away from the drama. My stomach tightened. Did anything ever come of those accusations? Legally? No. The CPS thing went nowhere. The boss thing, I don't think she ever actually filed a formal complaint, just poisoned the well with everyone in their department until he decided he wasn't worth it. So she's done this before. Yeah. And here's the thing that took me a while to figure out, I don't think she does it out of malice exactly. I think she genuinely believes her own narrative. When something doesn't go her way, she spins a story where she's the victim and you're the villain, and then she acts on that story like it's absolute truth. By the time you realize what's happening, she's already burned half the town down. We talked for another 20 minutes, and by the end of it, I had a much clearer picture. This wasn't a one-time vindictive episode. This was a pattern. A well-established, consistent pattern that Janet had apparently used for years. Monday morning, I called Diana again. I need you to look into something for me, I said. I want to know if there are any other incidents in Janet's background. False reports, restraining orders, employment disputes. Anything. That's going to take some time and possibly some money, Diana warned. I don't care. Do it. What Diana uncovered over the next 2 weeks was both worse and more useful than I'd expected. Janet had indeed filed a CPS report on Richard's second wife, which was documented. That report had been thoroughly investigated and dismissed as unfounded. There was a formal record of that. But there was more. During her time working at a marketing firm 3 years ago, she'd accused a colleague of sexual harassment. The case had been investigated internally, and while the company had settled with her for undisclosed terms, they'd also let her go. When Diana dug deeper, she found that the colleague, a woman named Susan Chen, had moved to another firm and was apparently keeping quiet about it. Diana managed to track down an email Susan had sent to a friend, obtained through careful inquiry, describing the accusation as completely fabricated and admitting that Janet had a pattern of making false claims when people didn't work her way. There was also a pattern of complaints to various authorities about different people in Janet's life. A noise complaint filed against a neighbor with whom she'd had a property dispute. An anonymous complaint to the health department about a gym where a personal trainer had allegedly rejected her advances. The gym, upon investigation, had found nothing. The picture that emerged was damning, a woman who used the system as a weapon, who weaponized accusations and complaints not because they were true, but because they served her narrative of victimhood and her need for control. By Wednesday of that second week, I had a decision to make. I could take all of this documentation to Diana and let her handle it properly through legal channels. I could sue for harassment, defamation, tortious interference. I could let the system deal with Janet the way it was designed to deal with people who abuse it. Or I could do what I'd been fantasizing about since that moment in my office. I could use what I'd found to preemptively destroy her credibility. I could make sure that anyone who might be influenced by her accusations, employers, mutual acquaintances, anyone she might try to manipulate in the future, knew exactly what she was. I was still in that headspace, weighing the options, when the third escalation hit. Sarah called me at work, her voice shaking in a way I'd never heard before. She called Megan, Sarah said without preamble. She called Megan and told her that you were only hiring Emma because you wanted to have an inappropriate relationship with her. She told her that you were a predator and that Emma was in danger. The fluorescent lights of my office suddenly felt too bright. The air felt thin. Where is Megan? I asked. She's at school. But Michael, do you understand what she's doing? She's not just coming after us anymore. She's trying to turn your daughter against you. She's implying something absolutely disgusting about you and Emma, and if that accusation gets traction. I know. And I did. I understood with perfect, crystalline clarity that Janet had crossed a line that changed everything. This wasn't about business anymore. This wasn't about my marriage or professional reputation. This was about a child, and it was about an accusation designed to destroy not just my reputation but my relationship with my daughter. This was exactly the kind of scorched earth that Janet specialized in. I looked at the documentation spread across my desk, at the pattern Diana had helped me build, and I made a final decision. No more waiting. No more strategy. No more giving her the benefit of the doubt that she might come to her senses. Janet had just crossed from vindictive to truly dangerous, and I was going to respond accordingly. #Chunk4. I didn't go home that afternoon. I couldn't. If I went home, if I saw Sarah's face or Megan's worried expression when she got back from school, I knew I'd do something reckless. I'd drive to Janet's place. I'd confront her. I'd say things I couldn't take back. Instead, I sat in my office with the door locked and made a list. Not the documentation list, that one was complete and organized. This was a different kind of list. This was the inventory of every person Janet had access to through her job, her social circles, her connections. This was the map of her influence. And it was considerably larger than I'd initially thought. Janet worked in HR for a mid-sized insurance company. That meant she had access to confidential employee information, hiring decisions, and, most troublingly, the ear of management. If she wanted to, she could potentially poison the well with her employers just as effectively as she tried to do with mine. She had book clubs, tennis leagues, a women's professional networking group. She had relationships with Megan's teachers, the parents of her friends, her church community. She had reach. My phone buzzed. A text from Diana, call me. Not text, I waited until 5 p.m. to call her from my car, still in the parking lot of my office building. I've had 2 more calls today from people you know, Diana said without preamble. Both passing along rumors. Both originating from Janet. Michael, she's accelerating. I know. She called my stepdaughter's mother and made an accusation. What kind of accusation? I told her. The words felt poisonous in my mouth. Jesus Christ, Diana breathed. That's a significant escalation. Michael, that's the kind of accusation that, even if completely false, can cause enormous damage if it spreads. If she files a formal complaint. She hasn't. Not yet. But she will. Then we need to move now. Before she does. I can file a cease and desist. I can go after her for harassment, defamation, tortious interference with business relationships. I can. That's not enough, I said quietly. What do you mean, that's not enough? I mean we're playing defense. We're reacting to each accusation as it comes, patching holes as she creates them. She's playing a different game, Diana. She's playing to destroy. And she won't stop until she's taken everything from me. There was a pause on the line. When Diana spoke again, her voice had shifted into the careful tone lawyers use when they're about to give you advice they think you don't want to hear. Michael, what are you thinking? I'm thinking about the information we've gathered. I'm thinking about the pattern. I'm thinking about what happens if the right people know about it. The right people being her employer. Her professional community. The people she's trying to influence. That's not a legal strategy. That's a character assassination strategy. Yes. Michael. She's trying to destroy my relationship with my daughter, Diana. She made up a disgusting accusation about me. She's not going to stop because I sent her a cease and desist. She's going to escalate further. I know it. You know it. Richard told me that's what she does. What you're describing is going public with information that could be considered defamatory if presented incorrectly. Even if everything we have is factually accurate, the way you present it matters. The context matters. The intent matters. And your intent right now, as you're describing it, sounds like revenge. It's not revenge, I said. It's preemption. It's the same thing, legally speaking. I started the car. I didn't know where I was going yet, but sitting still was making me feel trapped. Then help me make it not that, I said. Help me make it about facts. About truth. About warning people about a pattern of false accusations. That's not slander if it's true. That's not defamation if it's factual. Michael, I need you to slow down. I need you to understand what you're asking me to help you do. You want to publicly disseminate information about your ex-wife's pattern of making false accusations. Even if everything we have is ironclad, even if we present it perfectly, you're going to come across as vindictive. You're going to look like you're using your resources and your influence to destroy her. And here's the thing that keeps me up at night. She stopped. What? I pressed. What if it doesn't work? What if you expose all of this and she digs in deeper? What if she decides to actually follow through on filing that accusation about you and Emma? Now you've publicly demonstrated that you have a motive to destroy her credibility. Now you've given her evidence that you're willing to use information you've gathered to hurt her. Do you see how that looks? I did see. And the clarity of it made me feel something shift inside my chest. So what do you recommend? I asked quietly. I recommend we go the legal route. I recommend I file the cease and desist immediately. I recommend we document this latest accusation about you and Emma. I recommend that if she files any formal complaints, we respond through proper legal channels. And I recommend that you let the system do what it's designed to do. The system is what she's been abusing. I know. And the system is also what will protect you when she finally goes too far. Which she will, Michael. People like your ex-wife always go too far eventually. They can't help themselves. And when she does, when she files that false accusation, when she makes that documented complaint, that's when we have her. That's when we have something that can't be explained away or defended. I drove in silence for several minutes, making my way out of the downtown area and toward the residential neighborhoods beyond. The evening was settling into that golden hour light that made everything look deceptively peaceful. There's something else, Diana said, her voice softer now. Megan. Has she talked to you since her mother called her? Not yet. She's still at school. When she comes home, you need to talk to her. You need to hear what Janet said, exactly what words she used. You need her to understand that the accusation is false and that you're handling it. Because Michael, the real damage Janet is trying to do isn't to your business or your reputation, it's to your relationship with your daughter. Don't let Diana win that war while you're focused on winning the other one. She was right. And I hated that she was right, because it meant that the one thing I wanted to do, hit back hard and fast, was exactly the thing that would hurt Megan most. Okay, I said finally. I'll wait. I'll let you handle the legal side. But Diana. Yes. If she files that accusation. If she makes it formal. Then we go on offense. We'll cross that bridge when we get to it, Diana said, which was lawyer speak for I'm going to hope it doesn't come to that. But as I drove toward home, toward my wife and daughter, I knew it would come to that. Janet had already decided on her endgame. Now I had to decide on mine. #Chunk5. When I pulled into the driveway, Sarah's car was already there. Lights were on in the kitchen and the living room, which meant Megan was home. I sat in my car for a moment, trying to compose myself, trying to become the version of myself that my daughter needed to see, calm, reassuring, in control. Not the version that had been circling Janet's name on a mental map of her professional connections for the past 3 hours. I found them in the kitchen. Sarah was making tea, her movements precise and purposeful in the way they always were when she was anxious. Megan sat at the counter, still in her school uniform. She worked the front desk at a local dental office 3 days a week, and her eyes were red. Not from crying, I realized as I stepped closer. From anger. "Dad," she said, looking up at me. "Mom called me today," she said. Megan's voice cracked. She stopped, swallowed, and started again. "She said something really messed up. About you and Emma." The word Emma hit me like a physical blow, but I kept my face steady. I pulled out the bar stool next to her and sat down, my movements deliberate and slow. "Tell me exactly what she said," I said quietly. "Word for word if you can." Megan glanced at Sarah, who set down the kettle and moved to stand behind our daughter, a hand on her shoulder. The simple gesture steadied me. We were a unit. Janet couldn't understand that, couldn't comprehend the way love could bind people together against a particular brand of cruelty. "She said that you were being inappropriate with Emma." She used that exact word. Inappropriate. She said she was worried about her safety and that she was thinking about calling someone. CPS, I think. She said she just needed to warn me because she was my mother and she had to look out for me. Megan's eyes filled with tears, but her jaw was set hard. "She said you were only nice to Emma because you wanted to keep her from telling people the truth." And then she started crying, actually crying, Dad, like she was the one who had been wronged. I closed my eyes for a second. The accusation hung in the air like a toxic gas, poisonous and difficult to clear away. Even knowing it was false, even knowing the full context of why Janet would make such a claim, hearing it reflected back to me through my daughter's voice felt like a violation. "Megan, listen to me," I said, opening my eyes and looking directly at her. "What your mother said is completely false. There is nothing inappropriate between me and Emma. I care about Emma because she's my stepdaughter and because I love your mom. That's it. That's the entire truth." "I know," Megan said, and the certainty in her voice surprised me. "I know it is, Dad. But the fact that she would even say something like that." She trailed off, shaking her head. Why would she do that? This was the question I'd been dreading, because the only honest answer involved painting her mother in a light that would damage Megan's relationship with her. But she deserved the truth. She deserved to understand what was happening, even if the understanding came with a cost. "Your mother is angry," I said carefully. "She's angry about my marriage to Sarah. She's angry that I've moved on and built a life that doesn't include her. And when people are angry like that, when they feel powerless, sometimes they do things they wouldn't normally do. Sometimes they say things that are designed to hurt the people around them, especially the people they think they can manipulate. She's trying to manipulate me." Megan's voice rose slightly. "By accusing you of something disgusting?" "Yes," I said plainly. "That's exactly what she's doing." Sarah squeezed Megan's shoulder. "Your dad's being more generous than she deserves," Sarah said quietly. "This is a calculated attack. This is your mother trying to create distance between you and your father because she thinks it will give her leverage over him." Megan stood up abruptly, her chair scraping back against the tile floor with an angry screech. "That's insane. That's actually insane." She started pacing, her hands clenched into fists. Has she lost her mind? Does she think I'm stupid enough to believe something like that? "No," I said. "I don't think she thinks that. I think she hopes that even if you don't believe it, the accusation itself will cause damage. And she's prepared to escalate this to people outside the family if she thinks it will work." As soon as I said it, I realized I'd made a mistake. Megan stopped pacing. "What do you mean, escalated? To who?" Sarah and I exchanged a glance. I'd been trying to shield Megan from the full scope of what Janet was doing, but shielding her meant leaving her vulnerable to future surprises. It meant she'd hear about the next escalation from Janet herself, which would be infinitely worse. "Your mother has already made false complaints about me to my business. She's spread rumors to people in my professional network. She's been trying to damage my reputation and my business relationships," I said. "And now that I've hired Emma, she's shifted tactics. She's decided that the threat to you, the threat to our relationship, might be more effective than attacking me directly." "Oh my God," Megan breathed. She's really trying to destroy you." "She's trying to destroy our family," I corrected. "She thinks if she can drive a wedge between us, if she can make you doubt me or worry about me, then she'll have succeeded in taking away the thing that matters most to me. That's how her mind works. That's always how it's worked." Megan sat back down heavily. I could see her processing this, could see the moment her love for me as her father collided with her blood relationship to her mother. It was a pain I couldn't shield her from, and it made me hate Janet in a way I hadn't quite allowed myself to hate her before. "What are you going to do?" Megan asked. The same question Diana had asked. The same question I'd been asking myself. "I'm going to let my lawyer handle it," I said, and it felt like a lie even as I said it. Not because it was untrue, Diana was handling it, but because it felt like an incomplete answer to what Megan was really asking. She was asking if I was going to fight back. She was asking if I was going to make sure Janet couldn't hurt us anymore. My phone buzzed in my pocket. A text from an unknown number, *, "I'm filing a formal complaint with CPS tomorrow. Better get your story straight, *. Janet. It had to be Janet, texting from a different number, escalating as I'd known she would. As Diana had warned she would. The text sat there on my phone, heavy with implication. She'd gone from rumor to accusation to threat of formal legal action in the span of a few hours. The bridge Diana and I had discussed was suddenly very close. #chunk6. I stared at the text message for what felt like an eternity, though it was probably only 10 seconds. The words blurred slightly as my vision tunneled. CPS. Child Protective Services. She was actually going to do it. She was going to weaponize the system itself. "Dad?" Megan's voice seemed to come from very far away. What is it? You went white. I looked up at her, then at Sarah. I could feel the moment slipping away from me, the moment where I could still control the narrative, still dictate how this unfolded. Janet had just stolen that from me with 13 words and a period. It's your mother, I said, showing them the phone. She's filing a CPS complaint tomorrow. Sarah read the message and her jaw tightened. I watched her do the same calculation I was doing, what this meant, how it would play out, how many people would become entangled in the machinery of it all. Megan looked like someone had slapped her. She can't just do that, Megan said. Isn't that illegal? Filing a false report. It is, I said. But she's betting that I won't pursue it. She's betting that I'll be too scared of what the investigation itself might do, the disruption, the questions asked, the appearance of impropriety. She's betting that I'll fold. I pulled out my phone and called Diana. It rang twice before she picked up, and I could hear the ambient noise of a restaurant in the background. She was still working, probably finishing up a dinner meeting. I was wondering when she'd make this move, Diana said, not bothering with hello. Where are you? Home. She just texted me. Says she's filing tomorrow. Of course she did. There was a pause. I heard her excuse herself, the background noise fading as she moved somewhere quieter. Listen to me. This is actually good. This is the moment where she goes from being a bitter ex-wife making complaints to your business to someone filing a false report with a state agency. That's a paper trail. That's documentation. That's leverage. It doesn't feel good, I said. It won't, Diana agreed. But here's what happens next. CPS will contact you. They have to investigate complaints. But they also have access to records. They have investigators who are trained to spot false accusations. And your situation, you have a stable home, a new marriage, no history of complaints, a stepdaughter who is 19 years old and legally an adult. This is going to be one of the easiest investigations they close. What about the disruption? Sarah had moved closer, close enough that she could hear Diana's voice coming through the phone speaker. What about having investigators in our home? What about what people will think if they find out? People are already going to find out, Diana said flatly. Janet is going to make sure of it. The question is whether we control that narrative or whether we let Janet control it for us. I heard what she wasn't saying, the bridge is here. This is the moment, I need to think about, I started. No, you don't, Diana interrupted. You need to listen to me very carefully. I've been doing this for 23 years. I've seen hundreds of cases like this. The moment someone files a false CPS complaint as a tactic in a custody or family dispute, they've exposed themselves. They've committed to a path. And that path has consequences. What kind of consequences? Megan asked. She'd moved closer too, and there was something harder in her voice now. Not the uncertainty of before, but something closer to resolve. The kind that involved termination of employment, Diana said. The kind that involved criminal charges. The kind that involve a protective order that keeps her away from your family permanently. But only if we're ready to go that far. The kitchen had gone very quiet. I could hear the hum of the refrigerator, the settling of the house around us, the weight of the decision sitting on my shoulders like a physical thing. There's something else you should know, Diana continued. I had an investigator look into Janet's previous employers. The ones before your current business had complaints. Not many, but they were there. She was terminated from a position at a marketing firm 8 years ago. The official reason was restructuring, but I found a former colleague who was willing to talk off the record. Janet filed a harassment complaint against a coworker who was promoted instead of her. The complaint was investigated and found to be without merit. 3 months later, she filed a second complaint against a different person. That's when they let her go. This was the moment. I could feel it happening. This was the moment where I transitioned from defending myself to offending. This was the moment where I stopped being passive and started being active. She has a pattern, I said quietly. Exactly. She has a pattern of using institutions and systems as weapons when she feels slighted. That pattern is her vulnerability. Sarah had her hand on my shoulder now. I could feel her steadiness, the weight of her support. She didn't say anything, but she didn't need to. She was telling me that whatever I decided, we would face it together. If I do this, if I give you the authorization to go after her, there's no going back, I said. No, Diana agreed. There isn't. She's still Megan's mother, I said. The words sounded hollow even as I spoke them. She's also someone who is willing to falsely accuse you of child abuse to punish you for moving on with your life, Diana said, not unkindly. That's the woman she's choosing to be. You don't get to make that choice for her. I looked at Megan. She was looking back at me with an intensity that made her seem older than 19. She was waiting for me to decide. They were both waiting. What happens first? I asked. We document the text message. We get it verified as coming from her phone number. We prepare a full dossier on her pattern of behavior, the false complaints to your business, the rumors she spread, the timeline of her escalation. Then, when CPS closes their investigation, which they will, quickly, we file a complaint of our own for filing a false report. We provide all of that documentation to her employer. We make sure they understand what she is. And if she retaliates further? I asked. Then we file for a protective order. Then we make sure she understands that every action has consequences. I looked at Sarah. She nodded slightly. Do it, I said. #Chunk7. The house felt different after I hung up with Diana. Not physically, nothing had changed, the furniture was still there, the lights were still on, the kitchen still smelled faintly of the pasta Sarah had made for dinner. But something fundamental had shifted in the air between us, like the moment before a storm breaks. I spent that night documenting everything. Every text message from Janet. Every voicemail. Every piece of correspondence I could find dating back years. Sarah helped, pulling up old emails on her laptop while Megan sat at the kitchen table with a notepad, writing down dates and times she could recall, moments when Janet had called to complain about something, moments when she'd been cold or bitter during exchanges. Around midnight, I realized my hands were shaking. Come to bed, Sarah said softly, touching my arm. You've done enough tonight. I wanted to tell her that I hadn't done nearly enough, that there were still gaps in the documentation, still angles I hadn't covered. But I could see the exhaustion in her face, and I knew that my anxiety was contagious. So I closed the laptop and followed her upstairs. I didn't sleep. I lay in the darkness next to Sarah, listening to her breathing gradually deepen into sleep, and I thought about the bridge that Diana had mentioned. I'd crossed it now. There was no going back to the version of this story where I simply defended myself, where I quietly endured Janet's complaints and moved forward with my life. I'd made the decision to actively pursue consequences for her actions. It should have felt empowering. It didn't. What it felt was like stepping off a cliff in the dark, trusting that the ground would be there. At 6 a.m., my phone rang. Unknown number. I took the call in the hallway so I wouldn't wake Sarah. Mr. Hendricks. A woman's voice, professional and clipped. This is Detective Sarah Chen with the police department. I'm following up on a complaint filed yesterday regarding your business operations. Do you have time to speak with me this morning? My stomach dropped. Yes. Yes, of course. I'll be brief, Detective Chen said. We received a complaint alleging that you've been engaging in financial fraud and tax evasion through your business. The complaint was filed by, she paused, presumably reading from a report, Janet Morrison. Can you tell me about your relationship to Ms. Morrison? She's my ex-wife, I said. I could hear how hollow my voice sounded. And I can tell you categorically that those allegations are false. Completely false. That's what I suspected, Detective Chen said, and something in her tone shifted. It became less official, more sympathetic. I've been doing this job for 18 years, Mr. Hendricks. I know what a genuine fraud complaint looks like. And I know what looks like someone trying to weaponize the system. This looks like the latter. The allegations are vague, they lack specific details about transactions or dates, and frankly, they read like someone who's angry rather than someone with actual evidence. I exhaled slowly. So that's it. It's dropped. I still have to do my due diligence. I'll need to ask you some questions, and I may need to review some of your financial records. But I'm not going to waste resources pursuing something that has spite written all over it. She paused. I will say this, though. Filing a false police report is a crime. If you wanted to pursue that, I could help facilitate it. Just something to consider. After we hung up, I sat on the edge of the bed, my hands still shaking but for a different reason now. One complaint down. I thought about Janet waking up this morning, probably already drafting her CPS complaint, probably already thinking about whatever else she could throw at me. She didn't know that Detective Chen had already seen through her. She didn't know that the system she was trying to weaponize had its own antibodies against exactly this kind of abuse. The phone rang again before I could process my relief. This time it was Diana. I heard from Detective Chen, Diana said. She called me as a courtesy to let me know what she suspected. She's smart. She's not going to pursue anything. One down, I said. Two, actually, Diana said. I contacted the administrative office that oversees CPS complaints this morning. I wanted to get ahead of Janet's filing. I explained the situation, provided them with the context of her pattern of behavior, and suggested they might want to flag this complaint as potentially frivolous. They appreciated the heads up. Something between gratitude and unease twisted in my chest. Is that legal? Getting ahead of it like that? Completely. We're not interfering with their investigation. We're providing them with context. There's a difference. Still, I said. I don't want this to look like I'm trying to manipulate the system the same way she is. You're not, Diana said firmly. You're being transparent about her history. That's the opposite of manipulation. But I understand your concern, so let's be careful about how we proceed from here. The rest of the day was surreal. I went to work. I managed to focus on meetings and spreadsheets and employee schedules. Megan came in at 3 p.m. for her shift, and she seemed lighter than she had the night before, like some of the weight had lifted just from knowing that action was being taken. But around 5 p.m., Sarah called me. The school called, she said. Her voice was tight. They want to meet with us. Something about a complaint they received about our home environment. My blood went cold. What kind of complaint? They wouldn't say over the phone. But they want us both there tomorrow morning at 8 a.m. That's when it hit me, really hit me, that Janet was going to go scorched earth. She wasn't just going to file one complaint. She was going to file every complaint available to her, from every angle, casting as wide a net as possible and hoping something would stick. Did they mention CPS? I asked. No. Just said it was a standard inquiry. But I knew. Somewhere in my bones, I knew that Janet had filed that CPS complaint this morning, just as she'd threatened. And now it was starting to move through the system. The machinery was turning. The gears were grinding. Diana had said that CPS would close their investigation quickly. That they were trained to spot false accusations. But they still had to investigate. And that meant that our home, our family, our choices, all of it was about to be scrutinized by strangers looking for something to prove us guilty of. I looked at my watch. It was only 5:47 p.m. on what was supposed to be a Tuesday night. By tomorrow morning, everything would be different again. #Chunk8. The CPS investigator's name was Miss Patricia Webb, and she arrived at our home at 9:30 a.m. on Wednesday with a folder and an expression that suggested she'd seen everything twice. Sarah and I had called in late to work. Megan was at school, we decided it was better that way. Diana had wanted to be present, but I declined. If this was going to happen, it needed to happen in our actual home, with just our actual family. I want to be straightforward with you both, Miss Webb said, sitting at our kitchen table with a cup of tea Sarah had insisted on making. I received a complaint filed by Janet Morrison alleging neglect and emotional abuse of a minor in your home. The complaint was vague on specifics but mentioned concerns about exploitation of a family member. It's about our stepdaughter working part-time at my business, I said. I'd prepared for this, rehearsed it in my mind 100 times. Her mother demanded I fire her out of spite. When I refused, she threatened legal action. This complaint is retaliation. Ms. Webb made a note. And the minor in question, your biological child? No, Sarah said. We don't have a biological child together. The complaint is about my daughter from my previous marriage, but she's 19. She's not a minor. I watched Ms. Webb's expression shift slightly. Not much, but enough. A flicker of understanding. I see. And the complaint mentioned a 12-year-old in the home. My heart stopped. 12 years old. Then it clicked. Our neighbor's son sometimes stayed with his father during the week. The boy came over occasionally to help with yard work, sometimes ate dinner with us. Sarah occasionally picked him up from school when his father had an emergency at work. But he didn't live here. He was never unsupervised. And he had absolutely nothing to do with our family conflict. I think I know who you're referring to, I said carefully. Our neighbor's son occasionally visits. But he's not in our care. His father is his legal guardian, and his father is aware of any time he spends here. May I speak with him? Of course. You could also call my neighbor directly. Ms. Webb made another note. I'd like to walk through the house, if that's all right. Just a standard assessment. We walked her through every room. Our bedroom was clean and organized. Megan's room, which she'd lived in before moving into the dorms at community college but still used as a home base, was typical teenage chaos, but there was nothing unsafe about it. The kitchen was modern and well-stocked. The bathrooms had locks on the doors. Everything was normal. Everything was fine. When we got back to the living room, Ms. Webb set down her folder. I want to be honest with you, she said. I've been doing this for 15 years. I know what genuine concerns look like. I also know what looks like someone using the system as a weapon. This complaint has every hallmark of the latter. The allegations are nonspecific, the timeline is vague, and the supposed minor isn't even actually in your care. Relief crashed through me so hard I had to grip the back of the couch. That said, Ms. Webb continued, I still have to file my assessment, which will note that there are no indicators of abuse or neglect in this home. I will also note that this complaint appears to be filed in bad faith as retaliation for a personal dispute. If I were you, I'd consider documenting this entire interaction and discussing your legal options with an attorney. She stood to leave, then paused at the door. Between you and me, and this is off the record, your ex-wife is playing a dangerous game. False reports waste resources that could be going to children who actually need help. The system is getting better at weeding these out, but it still costs money, time, and puts families through unnecessary trauma. If she does this again, you have grounds to pursue a civil case against her for abuse of process. Your attorney can advise you on that. After she left, Sarah and I sat in silence for a long moment. It's almost over, Sarah finally said. But it wasn't, not quite. The school meeting that afternoon turned out to be similar in nature. The complaint was about our home environment, which was vague enough to be meaningless. The school official assured us that they had no concerns and were simply following protocol. Another box checked. Another allegation revealed to be baseless. That evening, Diana called. The detective filed her report, Diana said. False police report on the record. The DA's office is reviewing it. They're likely to pursue charges against your ex-wife. What does that mean? I asked. It means she'll be charged with filing a false report. It's a misdemeanor, but it has consequences. Court appearance, possible fines, community service. More importantly, it creates a legal record of her having weaponized the system. Future complaints from her will carry that context. I should have felt triumphant. Instead, I felt tired. That night, I sat with Megan in the living room. She'd been quiet all day, waiting for information. It's done, I told her. All of it. The police aren't pursuing anything. CPS cleared us in their initial assessment. The school found no concerns. Your mother's complaints are being documented as what they are, retaliation. What happens to her? Megan asked quietly. She'll likely face charges for filing a false police report. Beyond that. I shrugged. I don't know. But it's going to be harder for her to use the system to hurt us again. Megan nodded slowly. I feel like I should feel happy about that. But I mostly just feel sad that she would do this at all. I put my arm around her. That's because you're a good person. She's your mother, and it's natural to feel sad about what she's become. Did she become it, or was she always like this? Megan asked. I think we all have the capacity for this kind of behavior, I said. But most of us choose not to follow that path. She chose differently. The following week, Diana called with an update. Janet's employer had been notified of the criminal charges pending against her. Not by us, by public court records. And they'd made their own decision about whether they wanted to keep an employee facing criminal charges for abuse of the justice system. Janet was fired on Friday. The vindication should have felt sweeter. Instead, what I felt was the weight of a line crossed that couldn't be uncrossed. Yes, Janet had started this war. Yes, she'd made threats and filed false reports and tried to destroy the relationships we'd built. But I'd chosen to meet her in that darkness, and now there was a criminal record attached to her name. A future-altering consequence. What I realized, sitting in my office that Friday afternoon while Megan worked the register out front, was that this wasn't really about winning. It was about survival. About protecting what mattered. And we'd done that. Our family was intact. Our reputations had been cleared. The system had actually worked to protect us rather than destroy us. That was enough. More than enough. It was everything.